Hey everybody, and welcome to another Chairman of the Board Top 10 video. Today I'm talking about my top 10 games of 2023, and this is the definitive list because if you remember at the end of 2023 I did make a preliminary top 10, but the list has changed quite significantly considering how many more games from 2023 that I have played since then. Now this was quite a difficult list to make because there was some tough competition. I thought all in all that 2023 was a very strong year, but before I get started on these 10 games, plus I'll go on from number 10 and mention some more games, I want to give a shout out to the show's sponsor, KIENDA.co.uk, who are my go-to online retailer, and if you use the link in the show notes or the QR code, then you can get 5% off your first order. At number 10, I have Footprints. Now, this was a game that definitely did fly by without making much noise. It feels to me like an old school Euro, and it's a card-driven Euro as you are essentially trying to manage this hand of cards to traverse this map going from the left side of the board to the right side of the board, collecting resources as you go, building up an engine to make you more efficient to traverse that terrain, unlocking endgame bonuses, completing goals as you go, and racing to the end to get some bonus points. And I love that tough decision of, do I use this card to move now, or do I increase my stats to move later? And I also love how delicately balanced that deck of cards is, because if you use them inefficiently, then you're not going to make it very far, and you're going to run out of steam just before you want to get everything you want completed. There's some good asymmetry as well with some of these player powers, and all in all it's just a nice stripped back game that feels like a game from yesteryear, very minimalist, and it just works well. So if you like games like The Quest for El Dorado, I think you'll probably like this one. So that is Footprints at number 10. At number 9 I have Wild Tiled West, which is actually a polyomino game, and I admit polyomino games have been done to exhaustion, but I do like the additional touches with this one and the way it feels distinct to many of the others. So number 1, I do like the way that you draft the tiles in this game in the first place through this dice drafting system that allows you access to certain rows or columns of these preset trays of tiles. And I also like how distinct all these different tiles are, because not only are you trying to kind of cover your board as much as you can to cover up these negative spaces, but also each tile has its own kind of benefit. So for example, some of them have cows on them, which we're trying to group together and then rustle them to get bonus points. Some of them have like sheriffs on them, which you can use to shoot these different bandits that appear on your player board. You've got abilities which are unlocked through these buildings that you can build, like in-game abilities, end-game abilities, and even kind of unique powers that you can acquire as well. So yeah, I really am impressed by this one. It flows lovely. It kind of ticks along at a good pace. There's good competition for those tiles, and you know, the dice drafting comes through quite strong. And it's just all in all a really nice package and a well-polished polyomino style game. So that is Wild Tiled West at number 9. At number 8, I have Dragon Keepers. Now this is a smaller box card game, kind of a set collection style game, as you are building up a hand of certain colours of dragons and then trying to play those dragons when the time is right, because when you draft these cards from these two decks, the requirements that you need to play are constantly changing. So for example, you have two piles. On the left hand pile it will have a number, and on the right hand pile it will have a certain colour or suit of dragon. So although you can draft quite a few cards per turn, you might choose to draft fewer cards than you are actually allowed to, because the requirements suit your current hand. So for example, if I have 4 blue dragon cards, I've just drawn the left hand pile and it's gone down to a 4. I already have the blue dragon cards in my hand, and the book is showing blue dragons, then I might not want to draft another card because it might completely mess up my requirements that I did have the ability to play. And when you play these cards, not only are you gaining victory points, which is also done in an interesting way because it constantly increases as the game goes on, but you'll also get some kind of bonus ability as well by collecting these kind of golden eggs, which will give you kind of majority bonuses, or let you get these wild dragons and all sorts. So there's good interaction here as well, because you can piggyback off other players' actions and play cards on their turns. And I also love this additional restriction, which is once you've played a certain suit of dragon and you've kind of locked in either side of them, you can no longer play the ones that you've played before. So timing becomes a big part of this game as well. So I really like this one. I think there's more than meets the eye with this one than when you first play it. But the more you play it, those layers start to unravel, and it's just an enjoyable little game. So that is Dragon Keepers at number 8. At number 7, I have Nar, which is another small box card game. Now, this is an engine builder racing style game, as you are playing these Viking cards to race to get to a certain amount of points. Now, I love the drafting system of this game, which is when you play a certain colour of card, that will determine the next card you pick up. So there's good forward planning here. And I also love the kind of how stripped back this game is, but the different routes you can take at the same time. So for example, if you keep on playing the same coloured card, you'll not only get the ability of the card you've just played, but also all of the cards that you've already played in that pile. And these cards will let you just get victory points. They'll let you climb this little track, which will mean that you generate more points passively. And it'll even allow you to collect these tokens that will allow you to kind of make shortcuts when it comes to cashing these cards in to get these more powerful contracts. So there's that good push and pull of, do I want to build my engine up, or do I want to kind of strip my engine away to cash in and get a bulk of victory points right here, right now. So yeah, there's a good tension here of trying to get things played as efficiently as possible. The artwork is absolutely beautiful. And all in all, it's just a well-packaged game. I can't really think of any way I would improve this one at all. It just flows wonderfully. I'll say, if anything, sometimes if someone's doing really well, they can end up pulling away. It's quite difficult to make that ground up. But because the game is so quick anyway, that doesn't really bother me too much at all. So all in all, this is a wonderful little game. That is Nar at number 7. At number 6, I have Match of the Century. Now, this is a 2-player chess simulation, but it's actually a card-driven game. And this is actually the most recent game to appear on this list at the last minute, really. And I was very, very impressed by this one, as you can see, by making the top 10. Now, this is a Paulo Moura design, and if you're familiar with his 2-player games, he does have the magical touch with these, and he knows how to very delicately balance them, and that really shines through in Match of the Century, where all you're doing is you're playing cards to these 4 different zones, essentially. And if you play the highest value card, then you will gain the influence of that particular zone, which will act in a tug-of-war style way to give you advantage. And if you end the round with the most advantage, then you'll get a victory point, and it's going to be a race to get to, I think it's 6 victory points. But the twist of this one is that when you lose a certain hand or a certain zone that you're playing to, then you'll get quite a powerful ability, such as being able to gain these pawns that will boost your power in future turns, or they'll allow you to do completely game-breaking things. That's fascinating. And what I also love about this game is the use of this kind of mental stress mechanism, where if you're constantly playing your highest cards to win the strongest value zones, or even using cards to hurt your opponent, your kind of mental fortitude will wear down, meaning that your hand of cards is diminished. It's in, you can only hold fewer cards, or you don't generate as many pawns each turn. And even you can even start games at a disadvantage or give your opponent an advantage, depending on where you're sitting on that track. So if you're really exhausted, then you're going to start the round at a disadvantage, or if you're really fresh, then you're going to start at an advantage. And you can imagine that kind of push and pull. And do I play this card now for its strength and hopefully win the round, but go down on exhaustion and so on? And there's additional wrinkles as well, because as in real chess, you are taking turns with your opponent as being the white pieces or the black pieces. And those are represented by these kind of double-sided cards. So one round you're playing them this side up, and the next round you're flipping them over and playing the other way. And what that means is you can sometimes deliberately throw rounds, because you might think, you know what, my white cards this turn are not good at all. Therefore, I'm going to sit this one out, maybe throw the game, get some abilities by losing particular hands, then flip my cards around and win the next round where I'm more confident. It's just excellently designed, again, so well balanced. It normally comes right down to the wire if you and your opponent are equally matched. And yeah, so impressed by the design prowess of this one. So that is Match of the Century at number 6. At number 5, I have Marabunta, which is another 2-player only game. Now, this is an I split you choose game, which is a mechanism I tend to enjoy, and it uses the I split you choose mechanism through the use of dice. So each round you're going to be rolling a cluster of dice. Each dice is kind of corresponding to a different zone on this area control map, and then the first player is going to divide those dice how they see fit. Your opponent will choose those dice first and you will get what's remaining. And these dice let you do lots of different things, such as writing numbers in these different zones to try and control them. The highest numbers, values overall, or tallied up, will win that particular zone. But you can also choose these little flag symbols that will increase the yield of victory points in each of those zones. So if there's a zone you're doing really well in, you might want to say, I'm going to make that worth even more and increase my victory points at the end of the game. You can collect these crates that will give you kind of abilities that you can use as the game goes on, like these molehills that let you pop up anywhere on the map. And it's just such a cool little game, mixing that area control with the I split you choose mechanism comes together so well. It's such a great pairing of mechanisms. Good choices to be made here in such a short little game. And I always love that dilemma of how am I going to divide this cluster of dice up as best as I can so that I can squeeze everything I can out of it and hopefully lead my opponent to do what I want them to do. Just brilliant game. That is Marabunta at number 5. At number 4, I have Forest Shuffle. Now, this is a set collection card game where you are building this huge tableau of cards out by playing these trees and then populating those trees with these different animals, all of which score in different ways. Some score based on a sliding scale, some will score based on other things you've collected, or everything you can imagine when it comes to set collection. I love the multi-use card system here, as in order to play cards from your hand, you need to pay for those cards with other cards in your hand. So you need to know what to sacrifice, what to keep. And what makes it even more interesting is that when you pay with other cards, it goes into a common display which can be taken by other players. So of course, if you're going for different strategies, that can be something that you need to consider because you don't want to give your opponents what they want. A lovely flow to this one, just constantly just picking up cards, playing cards, not much downtime at all. Different techniques you can go for. I like the way you have to react on the fly, because you can't always get access to the cards that you really want, so you are tactically, reacting to what's in your hand to try and squeeze every victory point you can out of this game. And it's just a delight to play this one. I think it's a lovely game. I know there have been some critiques about the balancing of some of the cards. Now, I personally haven't really seen that because I think the more powerful cards, as long as everybody knows they're in there, are more scarce. You can't really find them so often. So it does come down to, there is a luck of the draw, but I think all in all, the deck is quite well balanced in terms of the frequency that these cards appear. I'm really looking forward to the expansion of this one too, because this is the game you can keep injecting life into it through new cards without even needing to mess with the recipe at all. So I think this is an evergreen feeling card game. I've certainly got no intention of parting with this one, and I'm always keen to get this one to the table. So that is Forest Shuffle at number 4. At number 3, I have Havalandi. Now, this is the second Reiner Knizia game on the list, the first being at Marabunta. Now, this feels more like a traditional Knizian, route building, kind of linking style game. Think of games like Through the Desert, Babylonia, Blue Lagoon. This one has some cross DNA with games like that. But I do love the added restriction on this game because essentially you have this big kind of pyramid style board built up of these hexes. And then each round, this hot air balloon is going to go around the edge of the board and determine where the next player can kind of place one of their tokens. Now, what you're trying to do in this game is you are trying to build up networks of these hot air balloons, kind of encroaching onto different sides of this main pathway that goes through the entire board. So kind of building up these groups together is a really good way to score points, but there's also incentives to do other things, such as going next to these pavilions on the edges of the board, or even trying to compile these groups of hot air balloons in certain zones on the board as well, because the more you get them, the more they compound and build up victory points. But of course, you only get to place one token per turn, meaning that other players might grab the spots that you want, making every single spot on the board very lucrative. There's some cool little game-breaking powers as well that you can use through these bonus tokens that will let you kind of build on top of somebody else, but you can only get one chance to do that the entire game. Or things such as being able to place anywhere. Those the little tricks that you can pull, and you need to know when to use them and pace yourself. I suppose this one, out of all the Knizia games that I mentioned before, this one I think is maybe the most kind of nebulous in terms of the scoring. It might take a little bit of maybe a turn or two or a game or two to understand how it really works. Not the most intuitive, I think, but once you've got your head around it, I think this game is excellent. Plays pretty quickly, scales very well too, because if you're playing with fewer than 3 or 4 players, You just use some neutral pieces on the board that simulates another player very well. And there's some good replayability through the use of these endgame scoring cards as well that are modular. And it just feels like a true Knizia game to me. I know this one is probably a bit more polarizing to some of his other games, but I happen to love it. So that is Havalandi at number 3. Okay, so let's get into the top 2 games now, and I was really at my wit's end determining what was the best out of these two. So this could definitely be, number 1 could be number 2, number 2 could be number 1. I think they're both excellent games. But at number 2, I have Patterns. So Patterns is actually the sequel to one of my favourite 2-player games, Mandala. And this one somehow manages to feel like Mandala, but still feel completely different than Mandala. I suppose the main thing that it keeps from the original Mandala is the scoring system, where when you're playing things through the game, the first thing that you score are worth 1 point each, the second thing you score are worth 2 points each. So you are kind of building up the value of these things as you go on, but the more valuable things are going to have less time for you to score for them. And I love the way that your opponent might be doing the same thing but with different pieces. So my very valuable pieces might be very inexpensive to you, meaning that you might want to snatch them from me to prevent me from having those most valuable pieces. But this one has much more of an abstract feel to it. Kind of feels more like an ancient style game, as you are placing these discs everywhere on this big map. And all you're doing is you're trying to create groups of the same colour by kind of flipping tokens around, swapping them and claiming them for yourself and building up groups. Your options very quickly get squeezed in this game. This game can be played in around 15 minutes, but the taxing decisions come thick and fast in this one. It's all about knowing when to switch onto the next colour and knowing when to grab something before somebody else does. The sense of urgency is so strong, and it is, I think, is a masterpiece of design. When I heard this game was coming out, I thought there is no chance this could hold a candle to the great Mandala. And you know what? At this point, I'm not even sure that I might even like this game a little bit more than Mandala. That's how good this game is, and because they're both like incredible 2-player games. So that is Patterns. Highly recommended if you like your 2-player abstract head-to-head style games. And finally, at number 1, I have The Veil of Eternity. Now, this is a card game with tons of synergies as you are racing to get to a certain amount of points or have the most points by the time a certain amount of rounds go through. Now, the combos in this card have truly impressed me. How many card games are there out there where you're trying to combo cards together? Tons of them. But this one somehow struck a chord with me that made me just sit back and think, you know what, there's something special here. And a big part of that is because of how pure and minimalist it is, but it still feels like you're taking these big, interesting, bombastic turns. And some of the extra wrinkles in terms of the design decisions that have been made are so interesting to me. At number 1, I love the way that you pay for these cards, because in order to get currency, you need to sacrifice other cards, and generally the better creatures are going to be worth more currency, meaning that you can't always get the cards that you want because you need to discard them to get money. And at the same time, you are restricted to only ever having 4 coins on you at any time. Now, those denominations can be anything, but that restriction of having a physical capacity of only 4 coins can add some more decision space and can really determine the way that you need to order things and take these certain actions. I also love the drip feeding in this game because you are only restricted to play a number of creatures equal to the round you're in. So in the first round, you can play 1 creature. In the second round, you can have a maximum of 2 creatures. And then the third round, 3 creatures, and so on. So that everything's not thrown at you at once. You do have that idea of how to best exploit your powers. Doing things at the right time, sacrificing creatures at the right time to play more powerful ones. Just tons of different avenues you can go down. And it is, I think, is a truly great design. Now, I'm really interested to see what this newly released expansion is going to, or announced expansion is going to entail. I really hope that it does keep the purity of the original and just adds in more combos. So I really do think the sky is the is the limit with this game. I think it is so endless in terms of the possibilities that you can do, as long as you stay within the confines of that brilliantly smooth gameplay. So that is The Veil of Eternity, my favourite game of 2023. So there we have it, that concludes my 10 favourite games of 2023. I will mention some others that very narrowly missed out on the list. The first of which being Darwin's Journey. I think this game is amazing for a heavy Euro. The reason it fell a little bit short, it would be my number 11 probably, is because I did find it quite difficult to get to the table because it is a lot heavier than these other games and takes a bit more time, but still a brilliantly designed game. Empire's End, a good kind of mitigation style game, trying to survive all these catastrophes hitting you. Triketa, lovely set collection game based on Coloretto. Rome in a Day, another game that uses the I split you choose mechanism to a very high standard. Far Away was a good one, another little tableau builder as you're trying to play these cards in the right order to score as many points as you can. Nemalia was another great one where we're trying to overlap these cards, trying to score as many points as you can based on these changing dynamic goal objectives. Jerusalem, another great Euro, and also Rafter 5 for a little dexterity game. Now there were tons of other games that could have been mentioned. I thought 2023 was an excellent year. Tons of games that I personally enjoyed, and hopefully 2024 shapes up the same way. But that concludes the video. Hopefully you have enjoyed it. If you have, please be sure to hit like and subscribe to the channel and check out my other content too. But for everybody else, I'll see you next time on Chairman of the Board. Bye bye.